Previous ones, we saw instances where people are choosing themselves to do the right thing or the wrong thing. In this case, we're making judgments about other people where people might have moral views, but the actual thing that the people are doing have got no real effect on the people who are judging them. So the question is why? So a family's dog was killed by a car in front of their house. They had heard that dog meat was delicious, so they cut up the dog's body and cooked it and ate it for their dinner. Now, most people who are given this, and certainly in America and Britain, say that these people should be stopped or punished for doing this. But two things. First of all, what these people are doing in the story does not directly affect the person who's judging them, so why should we care about that? The second thing about this is that people often can't say what's actually wrong with it, which the guy who first did this study, a guy called John Haidt, calls moral dumbfounding. Another one here, a man goes to the supermarket once a week, buys a dead chicken, but before cooking the chicken he has sexual intercourse with it, and then he cooks it and eats it. Again, people say, this is wrong, we shouldn't do this, but you say, well, why? Well, the chicken's dead, it's not harming anybody, what's the problem? And people can't explain it. They can't explain what actually is wrong here, other than the fact by saying it's just wrong. So many feel uncomfortable. They say the protagonist should be stopped or punished, but they cannot say what is going on that's wrong. What is wrong here is the thing called moral dumbfounding. And also it's automatic and emotional. So a lot of our moral decisions are caused by flashes of affect. We find something pleasant, we find something disgusting, that leads us to a desire to punish somebody. Or we have the opposite effect where we find something praiseworthy and we have a desire to praise somebody. They're not the result of sitting down, thinking about it for a period of time and coming up with a solution or coming up with a decision in the way that morality used to be studied. We used to think that morality was somewhere people ponder a situation and come up with a decision. Haidt says, in fact, this is largely an automatic and emotionally driven process, something which he calls the social and intuitionist approach, because it's the moral intuitions rather than being the result of conscious cognitive labour. This is something that I have exactly the same experience. This is a chap called Gunther von Hagens, who's a German person, and he set up an exhibition called Body Worlds a number of years ago. I think it still periodically tours, and basically what he does is he signs people up to be part of his exhibition when they're alive, and then when they die, he basically takes their bodies from them. Well, not from them. But he takes their bodies and he subjects them to a process of plastination. So he takes the skin off, sometimes takes the muscle off in certain times, and then he what's called plastinates it. So it's a kind of polymerizes, plasticizes, if you like, the muscle so that the muscles don't kind of decay. So this is a real person at the front and at the back, and these are real muscles, but they have been treated so that they have kind of coated with the plastic stuff so that they don't decay. Some friends went to see this, and I just thought it was completely wrong. But then he said to me, well, why? The people willingly went into it. They're dead. They can't suffer. They didn't suffer. They died of natural causes. To me, it was just wrong. But I had to say to him, I've got no justification for saying that. I can't say why this was wrong. I just feel it is. That's an example of moral just dumbfounding. I couldn't articulate the reasons for my revulsion of this and why I thought it was morally incorrect. All I could do was say that I thought it was wrong. So why do we judge other people in this way? Especially when their actions don't affect us. Why do we care if a man has sex with an oven-ready chicken? Who cares? Why do we care? Well, one explanation is based upon a thing called coordination game. Basically, people agree to do things the same way. It doesn't matter which way you do it, as long as everybody agrees that you do it the same way. Classic example is whether you drive on the left or the right. There is no real difference, particularly whether a culture decides to drive on the left or on the right hand side. No difference at all, as long as everybody drives on the same side. If half the people drove on the left side and half the people drove on the right side, it'd be a disaster. So UK, Japan drive on the right hand side, on the left hand side. US, Germany, many other countries drive on the right. All that matters is that we all drive on the same side. Okay. So this idea was used by Peter Discioli to try to explain exactly why it is that people judge other people morally when they transgress a rule. He basically says that imagine a situation in which two people are in disagreement, right? Somebody person A steals from person B, okay? Now, imagine that 50% of the people side with person A and 50% of the people side with person B. What we'd then have is two evenly matched groups all disagreeing with each other, and there's a potential for conflict there. So if those two groups start fighting with each other, then two evenly matched groups will often have disastrous consequences for the members. You get a lot of people killed or injured. However, if you have a situation in which there is a moral rule, don't steal, for example, then if person A steals from person B, then the majority of people will side with person A because they say stealing is wrong. And probably a minority and nobody would side with person B. When you've got very unequal groups like that, it's very unlikely that the smaller group will start to get into conflict with a bigger group. They'll back down. So Discioli's idea is that the reason why we want to all adhere to the same moral rules is because it's a coordination game. It doesn't really matter what the moral is. Stealing is right, stealing is wrong, whatever. All that matters is everybody sticks to the same rule to avoid these conflicts. It's a bit like driving on the left. If you imagine 99.9% of people drove on the left and only 0.1% of people drove on the right, that would be a problem some of the time, but it wouldn't be anything like as bad as if 50% of the people drove on the left and 50% of the people drove on the right. So judging other people arose to encourage everyone to adhere to the same rules to prevent costly conflicts caused by evenly matched groups, because most of us, or all of us, are on the same side, probably most of us. So it's a kind of coordination game. It doesn't matter if you drive on the left or the right, it matters if you drive on the same side. It doesn't matter if we believe X to be right and Y to be wrong, or Y to be right and X to be wrong. All that matters is that we choose the same thing to prevent these costly escalating conflicts. There is a problem with this though, because the point of this explanation is to ask why people judge people morally. Okay. The problem with this is that if person A steals from person B, okay, then in order for people to take sides, then they have to be judging somebody. Otherwise, he wouldn't care. Person A's got nothing to do. Person B's got nothing to do with me. Why should I care if person A steals from him? So the very thing that they're trying to explain, why do people judge each other, by proposing this side-taking hypothesis, is actually required in order for people to take sides. So the explanation can't actually work, because if people didn't judge people at all, we're trying to explain why people judge each other, but if people didn't, then there wouldn't be any conflicts because nobody would care. So the very thing that they're trying to explain is required in order for their explanation to work. So are there any other problems, any other accounts of this? Well, there's one that actually I'm working on at the moment with a PhD student, and one is that we want people to be all singing from the same song sheet. We want people to all be believing in the same thing, be doing the same thing, in order to increase in-group cohesion. Why do we want in-group cohesion? Because almost certainly our evolutionary history is one and still remains one of intergroup conflict. Small groups fighting each other still happens today. So it seems that this has left its mark on our psychology with in-out-group rivalries, and I think there's a reason for this. So we want to increase our in-group cohesion in order to better repel attacks from other groups. Okay, and we do know that people like people who are like them. So this idea of homophily is that people like people who are like them, but we're arguing here that people also want to make people within a group like them by praising it when they follow the rules of the group and condemning them or punishing them when they don't follow the rules of the group. And there is some evidence for this. So when a group is in competition with an out-group, people punish in-group members who are not contributing more than when there's no outgroup mentioned. So this again seems to be some way of trying to increase conformity and cohesion within a group during conflict. People who are willing to participate in conflict wish to punish people who don't, so we're trying to punish people to encourage them to join in. And a computer-based model by Choi and Bowles shows that in-group altruism leads to groups being more successful. So in-group altruism basically means you help members of your group, but don't help members of the other group. So this actually helps groups to be more successful. We also show off our morals, right? We don't just punish people to change their ways. By doing the act of punishment or the act of praise, we're also demonstrating to members of our group that we are good moralists, that we are a good group member, to again encourage cooperation and again to promote cohesion. So Smith et al. Finds that moral values, having particular moral values, are excellent at binding groups together. And we see this in Twitter storms. Why do somebody says something racist, or somebody does something, somebody says the wrong thing, does the wrong thing, and then suddenly we get all these people jumping on the bandwagon wanting to condemn that person, or occasionally wanting to praise that person. Why do we do this? Why do we care? Why do we care that we're condemning somebody? We're probably not going to change their mind. Again, what we're doing as individuals is showing off that to other members of Twitter, in this case, other members of our group, that we are good people, that we are morally uphold. It's kind of doing morality. Finally, I'll just ask this question. Which of the following are the result of morality? Female genital mutilation, genocide, terrorism, and honour killings. Well, according to a recent book by Ryan Fisk called Virtuous Violence, all of them. And the quote from there is, except for a few psychopaths, hardly anybody harming anybody else is doing something that they intend to be evil. On the contrary, they intend to be doing something right and good. So there's a recent paper by Rick O'Gorman and colleagues who describes terrorism as an act of altruism. It's kind of a funny thing, but as the phrase goes, one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. So this is the idea that people do bad things not because they want to do evil things and hurt people for malicious reasons, for nasty reasons. They often want to hurt people because they believe that they're doing a good thing by punishing and hurting that person. So some of these things that Fisk talks about are directed towards the out-group, so terrorism, genocide, and so on. But some are directed at transgressions of moral codes within the in-group. So things like honour killings are done within the group rather than between one group and another. So things like rites of passage, such as female genital mutilation, circumcision, are there, according to Fisk, to ensure group membership. So what are morals for? Fisk and Rye again argue that it's to manage community relationships. So this is the kind of morality that I was discussing, to try and make sure that people are pulling together, singing from the same song sheet. We're managing hierarchical relationships, such as respecting your elders and so on. To manage reciprocal relationships, so tit for tat, eye for an eye. And at some point later I'll be discussing relational models theory, which again is one of Fisk's pet theories. So doing good and avoiding harming people seems to be natural. It seems to be two moral systems. But we're not unconditionally moral. We can, if we think we can get away with it, we can often act immorally, but not necessarily that much. We don't try and get away with too much, most of us. Kind acts are explained by direct and indirect reciprocity. So we help people in the hope that they'll help us out, but we also help people in order to increase our reputation as a good person so that other people will cooperate with us. Moral judgment could be the result of in-group conflict, but it also has a dark side. We tend to think of morality as being something lovely and squishy and warm and being kind to people, but as Fisk argues, often morality is something that leads us to punish, kill, murder and mutilate other people. And there are some references. Thank you.